Listen to me. A woman walked into a courtroom with bruises so severe she could barely hold herself upright. The judge hadn't even called her name yet. The Alpha King's guards were everywhere, watching her with eyes that could kill. And within 48 hours, she would collapse right there in front of everyone, and he would catch her. But here's what nobody expected. He wasn't supposed to be there at all. So why was the most powerful man in the kingdom sitting in that gallery? Why did he look at her like he'd been waiting his entire life for this exact moment? And most importantly, why would catching her change absolutely everything? Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. You're not going to believe where this goes. Her name was Iris. She was 26 years old, and she hadn't slept in 3 days. Not because she didn't want to. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. The face of the man who'd destroyed her. The man she was about to testify against in court. The women's shelter smelled like cleaning products and fear. She sat on the edge of a thin mattress in a room with 4 other women. None of them talked to her. They knew what she was about to do, and they knew what it would cost her. In their kingdom, women who testified against powerful men didn't have good endings. They had restraining orders that meant nothing. They had lawyers who were bought off before trial. They had families who turned their backs. Iris pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders even though the room was warm. The bruises on her neck were still visible despite 3 weeks of concealer. The ones on her ribs, those weren't visible. But every breath reminded her they were there. A counselor knocked softly on the door. Her name was Margaret, and she had kind eyes that had seen too much. Iris. I brought you tea. Margaret set a steaming mug on the nightstand. The trial starts tomorrow morning. We're going to get through this together. Iris wanted to believe her. But she'd heard the news. She'd seen the headlines. The man she was testifying against, Victor Castellanos, was connected to the Alpha King. Not directly, that would be stupid. But his cousin worked in the palace. His brother-in-law was buddies with one of the royal advisors. In their kingdom, that kind of connection meant protection. It meant power. It meant that a woman like Iris, with no family, no money, and no connections, was basically disposable. Tell me something, Iris said quietly, still staring at the wall. In all your years here, how many women actually win their cases? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. That was answer enough. The prosecutor seems confident, Margaret said finally, sitting on the edge of the bed. Your medical records are solid. The shelter director will testify about your condition when you arrived. The timeline matches. The timeline matches, but he has money, Iris interrupted. Money buys lawyers who twist timelines. Money buys expert witnesses. Money buys judges. She turned to look at Margaret, and there were tears in her eyes. I'm going to walk in there tomorrow, and I'm going to tell the truth, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. And everyone will act like I'm crazy for being scared. Margaret reached out and squeezed her hand. The Alpha King has changed things. He's been cracking down on violence against women. There's actual consequences now. Iris wanted to laugh. Or scream. Instead, she just picked up the tea and pretended to drink it. Iris couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she was standing by the window of her room, watching the street below. The shelter was in a safe part of the city, but nowhere felt safe anymore. That's when she heard it. A car door. 2 of them, closing quietly. Men's voices, low and urgent. Her heart started pounding. She pressed herself against the wall, keeping just enough space to see out the window without being seen. In the darkness of the street below, she could make out 3 figures. No, 4. One of them was enormous. Broad-shouldered, tall, moving with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no in his entire life. The visitors entered through the back entrance. Iris knew because she heard the security buzzer, then Margaret's voice in the hallway, surprised, deferential, nothing like her normal warm tone. Without thinking, she opened her door and crept toward the stairwell. She could hear voices coming from the ground floor office. "Understand the situation," a man's voice was saying. Low, steady, dangerous. "The trial starts tomorrow. My family has taken a particular interest in the outcome." Iris's blood ran cold. His family. The Alpha King's family. "Of course," Margaret was saying, her voice shaky. "We follow all legal protocols here. We encourage our clients to tell the truth." "The truth," the man repeated, and Iris heard something that sounded like amusement in his voice. "That's what we're counting on." She didn't wait to hear more. She practically ran back to her room, her mind racing. The Alpha King's family was here. They were interested in the trial. But which side were they on? Were they here to intimidate her into silence? Or was Margaret right? Was something actually changing? At 4 a.m., she finally fell asleep, but her dreams were nightmares of marble hallways and cold eyes. "Of course," Margaret was saying, her voice shaky. "We follow all legal protocols here. We encourage our clients to tell the truth." "The truth," the man repeated, and Iris heard something that sounded like amusement in his voice. "That's what we're counting on." She didn't wait to hear more. She practically ran back to her room, her mind racing. The Alpha King's family was here. They were interested in the trial. But which side were they on? Were they here to intimidate her into silence? Or was Margaret right? Was something actually changing? At 4 a.m., she finally fell asleep, but her dreams were nightmares of marble hallways and cold eyes. The courthouse was exactly what Iris expected. Imposing. Marble. Full of people in suits who belonged to a world she'd never be part of. Reporters crowded the steps. Someone had leaked what the trial was about, and it was a bigger story than she'd hoped. A young woman testifying against a wealthy businessman. The kind of story people loved to follow. But Iris wasn't thinking about the story. She was thinking about surviving the next few hours. Her lawyer, a woman named Claire who actually seemed to care, walked with her through the corridors. "You're going to do great. Just answer the questions honestly. Don't let him rattle you. The prosecutor is going to ask you to walk through what happened, and then you tell them." Simple as that. Nothing about this was simple. The courtroom was packed. Iris's eyes scanned the gallery, looking for threats. That's when she saw him. A man in an impeccably tailored dark suit, sitting in the back row. He was watching her with an intensity that made every nerve in her body stand at attention. Even before she knew who he was, she knew he was dangerous. His features were sharp, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that seemed to see through her skin and into her bones. He was older, maybe early 40s, with a kind of presence that made the entire room feel smaller. There were guards flanking him, obviously trying to be discreet and failing completely. "Who is that?" Iris whispered to Claire. Claire followed her gaze and went very still. "Oh my God," she whispered back. That's King Aidan. That's the Alpha King." Iris felt the world tilt. The Alpha King. The most powerful man in the kingdom, the one who'd supposedly reformed the entire justice system, was sitting right there, watching her, waiting. But why? The prosecutor led her through it methodically. Her name, her age, her employment history before the incident. It was all designed to make her seem normal, sympathetic, the kind of person people believed. Then came the hard part. "Can you describe the night in question?" Iris's hands were trembling. She gripped the edge of the witness stand to steady herself. From the corner of her eye, she could feel the Alpha King watching her. "I was at his apartment," she began, her voice barely steady. "We'd been dating for 4 months. I thought it was going somewhere. I loved him. Or I thought I did. I didn't see." She paused, forcing the words out. "I didn't see what he was really like. What happened that evening? We had dinner. He opened wine. I only had 1 glass, but She swallowed hard. "The next thing I remember clearly was him asking me to do something I wasn't comfortable with. I said no. He said I was being difficult, that I was playing games, that I owed him after he'd spent money on me." The courtroom was completely silent. I tried to leave. He grabbed my arm. I told him to let go, and She lifted her cardigan slightly, just enough for the jury to see the edge of a bruise. "He threw me against the wall. Then he pushed me onto the bed. And She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The prosecutor asked gentle follow-up questions. Iris answered them. All the while, she could feel the Alpha King's gaze on her like a physical weight. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. Victor Castellanos's lawyer was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive suit, condescending smile, the kind of confidence that came from always getting his way. "Miss Iris," he began, already establishing dominance by refusing to use her last name. "You said you loved my client." "I thought I did." "You were intimate with him?" "I was assaulted by him." "But previously, you had consensual relations?" "That's not the same as. Yes or no?" Iris wanted to scream. Instead, she said quietly, "Yes." "And on the night in question, you were drinking?" 1 glass of wine. Or perhaps more. You were embarrassed about how much you'd had, so you claimed just 1 glass. That's not what happened. You knew my client was a wealthy man. You'd been discussing your financial struggles. Perhaps you had a financial motivation to accuse him. Objection. Claire was on her feet. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. The jury was already wondering. Already doubting. Iris could see it in their eyes. By the time she left the stand, she felt like she'd been run over. During the lunch recess, Iris couldn't eat. She sat in the witness preparation room with Claire, staring at the wall. "You did well," Claire kept saying. "That last part was rough, but you held firm. The jury will." There was a knock on the door. A guard in formal royal livery stood there, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Iris, King Aidan would like to speak with you. Privately." Claire's eyes went wide. "Absolutely not. That's highly inappropriate. Tell His Majesty." "It's fine," Iris heard herself say. I'll speak with him. You don't have to. I know. Iris had no idea why she was doing this. But something in her needed to know why the Alpha King was here. Why he was watching her like that. If he was friend or enemy. She followed the guard through the hallways to a private chamber off the courthouse. The Alpha King was standing by a window when she entered, his hands clasped behind his back. Up close, he was even more imposing. Even more dangerous. Miss Iris, he said, turning to face her. His voice was exactly what she'd expected. Deep, steady, the kind of voice people obeyed without question. I'm King Aidan Blackthorne. I know who you are, she said, surprised at the steadiness in her own voice. A slight smile crossed his face. Of course you do. Everyone does. He studied her for a long moment. How are you holding up? The question was so unexpectedly human that it threw her off balance. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're terrified. You're sitting in a courtroom knowing that the man who hurt you is going to walk free, and there's nothing you can do about it because the system is designed to protect men like him. His eyes burned into hers. How am I doing so far? Iris's heart was pounding. Why are you here? I'm here, he said slowly, because I want to know who you are. I'm nobody. I'm just. Don't, he interrupted, stepping closer. Don't diminish yourself. I've been watching this trial very carefully. I've read the medical reports, the police statements, the testimony. And I know the truth when I hear it. I know what fear sounds like. I know what trauma looks like. He paused. And I know what it looks like when someone has been broken and is still standing. Something in Iris's chest cracked open. He's going to walk free. Everyone knows it. Why are you even here? Because I'm tired of women being broken, Aidan said quietly. And because something about you. He trailed off, studying her face as if trying to read something written beneath her skin. Never mind. You should go back to the courthouse. The trial continues this afternoon. He turned away, dismissing her. But as Iris moved toward the door, he spoke again. You're not alone, Iris. Whatever happens in that courtroom, you're not alone. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to so badly. The afternoon was worse than the morning. Victor Castellanos took the stand and lied with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything in his entire life. He portrayed Iris as unstable, as someone who'd gotten angry when he tried to end the relationship, as someone who'd fabricated the entire assault. She said she loved me, he told the jury, his voice filled with faux sadness. When I ended things, she snapped. She showed up at my apartment 2 days later, she deliberately hurt herself, and then she ran straight to the police with this story. The jury believed him. Iris could see it in their faces. They believed a rich man over a poor woman. Story of the world. By the time Victor finished, Iris was shaking so badly that Claire was worried she might have a seizure. The prosecutor called a few more witnesses, but it didn't matter. The jury had already made up their minds. As the judge announced they'd reconvene the next day for closing arguments, Iris felt something break inside her. Not metaphorically. Literally. Something essential and load-bearing, cracking clean in half. Iris was back at the shelter when Margaret found her. There's someone at the door asking for you. I'm not seeing anyone, Iris said flatly. He was very insistent. He's very important. Iris went downstairs to find one of the Alpha King's guards waiting in the shelter's modest sitting room. He held out an envelope. "His Majesty requested that you have this," he said, then left. With trembling hands, Iris opened it. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten. "Tomorrow, after closing arguments, I need you to wait in the courthouse bathroom on the 3rd floor. Come alone. Trust me." There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Margaret was staring at her. "What is it?" "I don't know," Iris said, which was true. But she knew she was going to do it. The next morning, closing arguments were brutal. The defense attorney painted Iris as delusional, vengeful, a gold digger who'd invented a fairy tale when reality didn't go her way. The prosecutor fought back, but without passion, without conviction. Everyone in that courtroom knew the ending before it arrived. The jury took 3 hours to deliberate. Victor Castellanos was acquitted on all counts. The gallery erupted, supporters cheering, Iris's side devastated. She just sat there, feeling the world spin away from her. This was always going to happen. Deep down, she'd known this was always going to happen. Margaret put an arm around her shoulder. "We can appeal." "No," Iris said quietly. "It's over." As people filed out of the courtroom, Iris stood on shaky legs. She needed that bathroom. She needed to understand why the Alpha King had wanted to meet her. Even though it probably didn't matter. Even though nothing mattered anymore. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor on legs that didn't quite feel like her own. The hallway was empty. The bathroom was empty. Except for him. King Aidan was leaning against the sink, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was alone. Completely, impossibly alone. His guards were outside the door. "I need to tell you something," he said before she could speak. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." "Okay," Iris whispered. The trial was never going to result in a conviction. You already knew that. What you don't know is why I was really here. He pushed off from the sink and stepped toward her. "I was here because I received a very specific message from someone I trust. Someone who told me to watch you. That you would need me." "Who? Who told you that?" "That's the question you should be asking," Aidan said softly. "But before you do, you need to know something else. Victor Castellanos didn't assault you once. He's assaulted 17 women. 17. And they all recanted, or they all disappeared, or they all changed their minds, because he was always one step ahead. Because someone always protected him." Iris felt the world tilt again. "Who?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Aidan said. "And what I found. Iris, what I found reaches into my own government. Into my own advisory council. There are people in positions of power who've been protecting men like Victor for years. Decades. Why would you tell me this?" "Because you need to know that you were right," Aidan said, and his voice was fierce now. "You were right about what happened. He is guilty. And I'm going to prove it. But I need your help to do it." Iris opened her mouth to respond, but that's when the world went white. She'd been standing too long. The stress, the lack of sleep, the emotional trauma, all of it finally caught up to her at once. Her vision swam. Her knees buckled. She felt herself falling, felt gravity claiming her, and then Aidan caught her. His arms were around her, strong and steady, holding her up when she had nothing left. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, feel the warmth of him, feel something in her respond to that contact in a way she didn't fully understand. "I've got you," he whispered against her hair. "I've got you. You're not falling anymore." When Iris woke up, she was in a bed that didn't belong to her. The mattress was too soft. The sheets were too expensive. The ceiling was painted with gold leaf, and through the enormous windows, she could see the palace gardens stretched out like something from a fairy tale. She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. Her body ached everywhere, not from the assault anymore, but from the days of tension, the trial, the adrenaline crash. She was wearing a silk nightgown she'd never owned before. The door opened. A woman in a grey uniform entered, carrying a tray of tea. "Her Majesty asked me to bring you this when you woke," the woman said, setting it on the nightstand. Her expression was completely neutral, the kind of professional blankness people learned when they worked in palaces. "King Aidan would like to meet with you in the study when you're ready. There are clothes in the wardrobe." I can't," Iris started, but the woman was already leaving. Iris was definitely in the palace. She was definitely in what looked like the royal guest suite. And she was definitely about to have a conversation with the Alpha King that would either explain everything or terrify her completely. She found the wardrobe. Inside were clothes in her size, a cream-colored dress, shoes that fit perfectly, accessories that cost more than she made in a month. Someone had known she was coming. Someone had prepared. When she made her way downstairs, following the silent guard who appeared at her door, the palace seemed to stretch on forever. Marble corridors, crystal chandeliers, portraits of dead kings staring down from oil paintings. This was a place where power lived in the walls. The study was lined with books, and Aidan was standing by the window, reading something on an expensive tablet. When he heard her enter, he set it aside immediately, giving her his full attention. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "How long have I been here?" 14 hours. "You collapsed at the courthouse. I had my personal physician come and check you over. You're dehydrated, malnourished, and your cortisol levels are through the roof, but you're not seriously injured. You brought me to the palace without my permission." "I did," Aidan acknowledged. "I was going to leave you in the hospital, but reporters found out you were there. Within 2 hours, they were outside your room. The shelter couldn't protect you anymore. Here you're protected." Iris wanted to argue, but he was right. The moment the acquittal came down, she'd become public property. A failed justice story. A woman who tried to take down a powerful man and lost. The media would have eaten her alive. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Answers," Aidan said, gesturing for her to sit. "And then I'm going to offer you something. A choice. But I need to tell you what I've found first." He walked her through it methodically. While Iris had been in the shelter, while the trial was happening, Aidan had been quietly investigating Victor Castellanos. And he'd found something rotten at the core of his entire administration. Victor's protection came from a man named Director Ashford, head of the Palace Security Division. A man Aidan had trusted for 15 years. Ashford had been quietly making charges disappear, buying witnesses, intimidating victims. He'd been protecting men like Victor for decades, not out of loyalty to them, but because they were paying him. And there were more names. Judges, lawyers, officials. An entire system built on selling justice to the highest bidder. "How did you not know?" Iris asked quietly. Because I was arrogant enough to think I'd changed things by making myself king, Aiden said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. I reformed the laws. I made speeches about protecting women. I even created a special task force to investigate crimes like the one against you. But the system is made of people, and some of those people are corrupt. And I was too focused on what was happening in the courts to notice what was happening beneath them. He pulled up a file on his tablet. It was full of names, transactions, evidence. I have Ashford in custody as we speak. Officially, it's a security review. But I'm building a case. And I'm going to need your help. My help. I'm nobody. I'm a cleaner from an apartment building. I don't know anything that would help. You know Victor Castellanos, Aiden said. You know what he did. You know what he's capable of. And you know that he's done it before. If I'm going to prosecute him properly, I need your testimony again. But this time, I'm going to make sure he doesn't walk free. Iris felt something in her chest tighten. The trial is over. Double jeopardy. Not if new evidence surfaces, Aiden said. Not if key witnesses recant. Not if the entire basis for his acquittal is shown to be corrupt. He was talking about unraveling everything. About forcing the women Victor had hurt to come forward. About turning his entire government upside down. This will take months, Iris said slowly. Maybe years. I know. And it will be dangerous. He won't let this go. He'll try, Aiden agreed. Which is why you're here. In the palace. Under my protection. Something flickered across Iris's face, and Aiden saw it. He stepped closer. There's something else, isn't there? Something about why I was really at that trial. Iris wanted to ask about the message he'd mentioned. The person who'd told him to watch her. But before she could, there was a knock on the study door. A woman entered, older, maybe in her 60s. With sharp eyes and Aiden's bone structure. She was wearing formal palace robes, and she moved with the authority of someone used to giving orders. Mother, Aiden said, surprise flickering across his face. What are you doing here? I heard we had a guest, the Queen Mother said, and her gaze fixed on Iris with an intensity that rivaled her son's. I wanted to meet her in person. This is Iris, Aiden said slowly. Iris, this is Queen Elena. Elena studied Iris for a long moment. Then she said something that made Iris's blood run cold. Did Aiden tell you about the dreams? Over tea in the Queen Mother's private quarters, Elena told Iris something that recontextualized everything. My family has always been sensitive to things other people aren't, Elena explained, her hands wrapped around a delicate china cup. My mother had it. I have it. And my son has it in spades, though he's spent his entire life denying it. We see things. Not the future exactly. More like echoes of things that matter. Patterns that other people can't perceive. You're describing psychic abilities, Iris said carefully. I'm describing what I would call heightened intuition if I was trying not to sound insane, Elena said with a slight smile. But yes. Essentially. Aiden had a very vivid dream 3 months ago. He dreamed about a woman with bruises on her neck and terror in her eyes. He dreamed about her collapsing, and about him catching her. He dreamed about it so clearly, so repeatedly, that he couldn't function. He asked me to look into it. You can see things too? I can ask the right questions, Elena said. I asked around. I found out about you. About the trial that was coming up. And I told my son that the woman from his dreams was real, and she was in danger, and he needed to be there. Iris felt the floor shift beneath her. This is insane. You can't base decisions on dreams. We're not basing anything on dreams, Elena said calmly. We're basing our decision to investigate corruption on evidence. The dreams just accelerated the timeline. They made Aiden pay attention to something he might otherwise have dismissed. But why me? Iris's voice was barely a whisper. Out of all the women who've been hurt, why am I the one he's dreaming about? Elena set down her tea and looked at Iris with an expression that was almost pitying. That's the question that terrifies him, isn't it? That's why he hasn't answered it. Because the answer might change everything. That evening, Iris was alone in her room when Aiden appeared at her door. He'd changed out of his formal clothes into something simpler. Dark pants, a rolled-up shirt. He looked less like a king and more like a man carrying an enormous weight. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Somewhere private." He led her through corridors she hadn't seen, up a staircase hidden behind a painted panel, and onto the palace roof. The night was clear, and the city sprawled below them, glittering with lights. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. "I need to tell you why you're really here," Aiden said, and he sounded tired. "Not the official reason. The real reason. Your dreams," Iris said. "Not just the dreams," he replied. "The dreams were the beginning. But when I started investigating, I found something else. Something that connects us." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. It was a woman, maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes and dark hair. She was smiling at the camera. "That was my younger sister Sophia," Aiden said quietly. "She died when I was 23. She was 20. She was killed by a man who was very similar to Victor Castellanos. Rich. Connected. Protected." Iris's heart dropped. Aiden. He was never prosecuted. The evidence disappeared. The witnesses recanted. The case was closed within months. I spent years trying to reopen it, but by then I was just a prince with an agenda. No one listened. His voice was strained. "I became king specifically to make sure it would never happen again. I reformed the laws. I created task forces. I did everything I could." "But you couldn't bring her back," Iris said softly. "No," Aiden agreed. "And every woman who was hurt like she was, everyone I couldn't help, I felt like I was failing her all over again." He turned to look at Iris, and she could see the guilt in every line of his face. "When I saw you on that witness stand, I saw Sophia. Not physically, but spiritually. The same determination. The same bravery. The same refusal to back down even though the system was rigged against you. So you're helping me because I remind you of your sister?" "I'm helping you because it's right," Aiden said firmly. "But also yes. Because when I dream about you, when I see your face so clearly that I can't forget it even when I wake up, I feel like maybe the universe is giving me a second chance. A chance to protect someone the way I couldn't protect Sophia." Iris wanted to feel grateful. Instead, she felt something darker. She was being cast as a stand-in for a dead woman. She was being helped because she fit a narrative Aiden had created about loss and redemption. "What if I'm not what you think I am?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm not brave? What if I'm just someone who had something terrible happen to her and doesn't know how to live in the aftermath? Then I'll help you figure that out, Aiden said simply. Because the difference between us and people like Victor is that we don't get to decide who deserves help. We just help. That's what makes us human. Something in Iris wanted to believe him. But she'd learned over and over again that men with power used the language of protection to justify control. I need time, she said. I need to think about all of this. Aiden nodded, accepting it. But before he left, he said one more thing. The trial will happen. Officially, it will be reopened on the basis of new evidence of corruption in the judiciary. Officially, it has nothing to do with my personal feelings. But between us, I'm doing this for you, Iris. Even if you never believe that, even if you spend the rest of your life questioning my motives, that's the truth. Over the next week, Iris learned what it meant to be inside the machinery of power as it turned against itself. She gave statements. She provided evidence. She worked with Aiden's team of federal prosecutors who were systematically dismantling the corruption network. Director Ashford had been the hub of the entire operation. He was charging $10,000 per charge dropped, $50,000 for a witness to recant, $100,000 for a case to disappear entirely. He'd been doing it for 20 years. The money trail led everywhere, to judges, to lawyers, to police officers, to politicians. But as they dug deeper, they found something worse. The corruption wasn't accidental. It wasn't just one bad actor. It was systemic, built into the machinery of justice itself. The night they brought down the first judge, a woman Iris had thought might actually believe her during the trial, Iris sat in the palace and watched the news report on every channel. The judge was being led out of her home in handcuffs. Her career, her reputation, everything she'd built was being destroyed in real time. Do you feel satisfied? A voice asked. Iris turned to find a woman she didn't recognize in the study. She was young, maybe 30, with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. She had Aiden's cheekbones. I'm Lyra, the woman said. Aiden's sister. I work in the Royal Justice Ministry. I thought I'd stop by and check on the woman who's apparently fascinated my family so much. I don't know what you've heard. I've heard that my brother is obsessed with a woman he met 2 weeks ago, Lyra interrupted, sitting down across from Iris. I've heard that he's willing to tear apart his entire government to help her. I've heard that he's dreaming about her in ways that terrify him. So I thought I'd come see what the fuss was about. Iris said nothing. She just waited. You're not what I expected, Lyra continued. I expected someone. I don't know. Someone more like the women Aiden usually dates. Beautiful, sophisticated, compliant. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. You're none of those things. You're terrified. You're traumatized. You're barely holding yourself together. So I'm wondering, what does my brother actually want from you? I don't think he knows, Iris said honestly. That seemed to satisfy Lyra. She relaxed slightly. At least you're honest. That's something. Because I need to tell you what happens next, and I need you to understand the reality of it. What Lyra explained over the next hour shattered the relatively safe narrative Iris had been constructing. The corruption extended deeper than the justice system. It reached into the military, into intelligence agencies, into the business world that Aiden relied on for trade and economic stability. To fully dismantle it, Aiden would have to destabilize the entire kingdom. There were people, very powerful people, who didn't want that to happen. They're already moving against him, Lyra said quietly. There's talk of a coup, or a scandal that will force his abdication, or some kind of accident that will remove him from power. She met Iris's eyes. And you're the catalyst. You're the reason he's going to lose his throne. I never asked him to help me. No, but he's going to anyway, Lyra said. Because he's arrogant. Because he thinks he can change the world. Because he's lonely in a way that no amount of power can fix. And he sees you as a chance to be the hero of the story. She leaned forward. Here's what you need to know. If he keeps going down this path, if he keeps pushing against the corruption, he will lose. The system is too big. The people protecting it are too powerful. And when he loses, everyone connected to him loses too. Iris felt cold. What are you saying? I'm saying you could leave, Lyra said bluntly. You could ask for asylum in another country. You could disappear. And without you, the whole justification for this crusade disappears. My brother would step back. He would preserve his throne. He would survive. In exchange for what? In exchange for Aiden never knowing what he was meant to become, Lyra said. In exchange for me knowing that my brother will still be alive and in power a year from now. In exchange for the kingdom remaining stable. You're asking me to betray him. I'm asking you to save his life, Lyra corrected. Even if he never knows it. Iris needed air. She needed to think. She went to the roof where Aiden had told her about Sophia, and she found him already there, standing at the edge as if he'd been expecting her. You talked to Lyra, he said. Not a question. How did you know? Because she's always trying to protect me, even when I don't need protecting, Aiden said. Did she tell you about the coup? Yes. Did she tell you to leave? Yes. Aiden was quiet for a long moment. I need to tell you something, and I need you to really listen. Because this is where we separate the truth from the story I've been telling myself. He turned to face her, and his expression was raw. I've been lying about why I'm helping you. Not to you. To myself. I told myself it was about justice. About replicating my sister's case. About being a good king. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. Iris held her breath. I'm helping you because I'm in love with you, Aiden said, and the words fell between them like stones into still water. I don't have a rational explanation for it. I barely know you. We've spoken maybe a dozen times. But when I see your face, when I hear your voice, when I think about the possibility of a world where you walk away and I never see you again, I can't breathe, Iris. And that terrifies me more than any coup. That's not love, Iris said, her voice shaking. That's obsession. That's projection. Maybe, Aiden acknowledged. Probably. But it's also what I feel. And I need to know if you feel anything similar, or if you're just another person using me for what I can provide. Iris wanted to run. Instead, she said, I don't know what I feel. I'm terrified of you. I'm grateful to you. I'm suspicious of you. I'm angry at you for making this bigger than it needs to be. So no, I don't think what I feel is love. I think what I feel is complicated and confused and not something I'm ready to name. Something in Aiden's face broke. Then that's your answer. You don't feel it. You're going to leave. And Lyra will win, and I'll survive my own mediocrity. That's not, Iris started, but he'd already turned away. The next morning, there was a press conference. Aidan announced that new evidence of corruption in the judiciary had been found, and he was launching a full independent investigation. He named names. He provided documents. He called for full transparency and accountability. Within hours, the opposition was mobilizing. News outlets that had been favorable to Aidan's reign suddenly started questioning his competence. Business leaders who relied on the corrupt system started pulling support. Politicians began calling for his resignation. Iris watched from her room as the kingdom started to tear itself apart. By evening, Aidan's advisors were openly begging him to back down. He refused. He continued the investigation. He continued releasing documents. He continued speaking truth. It was the most beautiful and most devastating thing Iris had ever seen. That night, she couldn't sleep. She went down to the study and found Aidan there, surrounded by papers, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked up, and there was no anger in his eyes. Just sadness. For what? For not being able to love you the way you want me to. For being scared. For wanting to run. "You don't need to apologize for being human," Aidan said quietly. "You don't need to apologize for self-preservation. If I leave, you'll stop the investigation," Iris said. It wasn't a question. "No," Aidan said. "I've already crossed the line. I've already spoken the truth in public. I can't take it back now. The investigation continues regardless. Even though it will destroy you?" "Maybe," Aidan said. "Or maybe it will save me. I won't know until it's over." Iris sat down across from him. "Tell me about Sophia again. Tell me everything." So he did. He told her about his sister. About her dreams of being a painter. About how she laughed. About the man who hurt her. About the moment he found out her killer would never face justice. And as he talked, something shifted in Iris. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was understanding. It was the recognition that they were both people who'd been broken by a system that protected predators. And neither of them could rest until that system was destroyed, even if destroying it cost them everything. "I can't promise to love you," Iris said when he finished. "But I can promise to stay. I can promise to fight with you. I can promise that whatever happens next, I'm not running." Aidan reached across the table and took her hand. For the first time, he didn't say anything. He just held on. 2 months into the investigation, something incredible happened. The first woman from one of Victor's other assaults came forward. She was terrified, but she came forward. Then another. Then another. By the time there were 5 women with corroborating stories, the case became undeniable. The prosecutor filed new charges against Victor Castellanos. This time, the evidence was airtight. This time, there was no corrupt judge to dismiss the case. This time, the system worked the way it was supposed to. The second trial was nothing like the first. Victor's lawyer threw everything he could at the new witnesses, but they didn't break. The women supported each other. They told their truths. And the jury, seeing multiple corroborating accounts, found Victor guilty on every count. 20 years in prison. It was far less than Iris thought he deserved. But it was more than she'd thought was possible. The night the verdict came down, Iris was in the palace, watching the news coverage. The kingdom was divided. Some people were celebrating the conviction. Others were calling for Aidan's resignation, claiming he was overreaching. The economic impact of the investigation was starting to bite. Trade partners were getting nervous. The stability that Aidan had provided was fracturing. But something else had happened too. Other women had started coming forward. Other cases. Other systems of abuse protected by corruption. The dominoes were falling, and they wouldn't stop until they hit bottom. Aidan appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted and exhilarated. Victor's in custody pending sentencing. We're starting operations to investigate additional cases. And there's something else. What? The opposition is pushing for a vote of no confidence, Aidan said. It will likely pass. I'm probably going to lose the throne, Iris. She stood and walked to him. For the first time, she kissed him. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a declaration of solidarity. It was saying, I'm here. I see what you're doing. And I won't let you face it alone. When they broke apart, Aidan had tears in his eyes. The vote of no confidence passed 3 days later. Aidan's cousin, a more conservative politician, would take the throne. There would be elections. The investigation would continue, but under different leadership, which meant it would probably slow down. But something had shifted in the kingdom. Women who'd been silent for decades were speaking. The culture was starting to change. It would take years, maybe decades, for the full impact to materialize. But the seeds had been planted. Aidan's formal abdication was set for 1 week later. He would step down with honor, remain as an advisor if the new king wanted him, and transition to private life. The night before the abdication, Iris found Aidan in his study one last time. It looked different now. Emptier. His personal items were being packed. Tomorrow, he would no longer be the Alpha King. He would just be a man. Any regrets? Iris asked. Thousands, Aidan said. But no regrets about what matters. The investigation will continue. Victor will serve his sentence. The women who came forward will have justice. Sophia would be proud. He pulled Iris close. I know this isn't the ending you expected. I know I probably created half of your trauma by being obsessed with you. I know that I might have ruined my kingdom because I couldn't let go of a dream about a woman I barely knew. But, Iris prompted, because there was a but coming. But I also know that if I hadn't listened to those dreams, if I hadn't been willing to follow them even when it cost me everything, then Victor Castellanos would still be free. And other women would still be hurt. And Sophia would still be unavenged. He pulled back just enough to look at her. So maybe the obsession was necessary. Maybe the dreams were real in the way that matters most. Iris was sitting in a new apartment, one she'd rented with her own money she'd earned from testifying at Victor's trial and writing about her experience. She was putting together her second article about the corruption investigation when there was a knock on the door. It was Aidan. He no longer had guards. He was dressed in casual clothes. He looked less like a king and more like a human being. Hi, he said simply. Hi, Iris replied. I wanted to tell you something, Aidan said. I've been getting requests from women's advocacy groups. They want me to lead a non-profit dedicated to investigating corruption in the justice system. They want me to find cases that fell through the cracks. They want me to do for other women what I did for you. Are you going to do it? Only if you'll do it with me, Aiden said. Not as a grateful victim. Not as someone who owes me anything. But as a partner. As someone who understands what we're fighting against. Iris studied his face. She'd learned a lot about him over the past 6 months. She'd learned that his obsession came from a genuine place of grief and guilt. She'd learned that he was willing to sacrifice everything for what he believed in. And she'd learned that love, real love, wasn't about perfect timing or destiny. It was about choosing someone over and over again, even when it cost you. Okay, she said. I'll do it. When Aiden smiled, she realized something. The woman who'd walked into that courtroom, bruised and terrified and certain she would lose, had survived. She hadn't just survived. She'd transformed. She'd become part of something larger than her own trauma. She'd become someone who could help others heal. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real ending to the story all along. Not the moment the Alpha King caught her as she fell, but every moment after, when she chose to stand. 1 year later, as Aiden and Iris walked through a park, passing a memorial to the women whose cases they'd reopened and finally solved, Iris asked him something that had lingered in her mind since Elena first told her about the dreams. Do you still have them? She asked. The dreams about catching me? Aiden was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. I stopped having them the night we kissed. It's like once it happened in real life, my subconscious didn't need to warn me anymore. That's convenient, Iris said, not quite joking. Or, Aiden said, squeezing her hand, maybe it wasn't really about the future at all. Maybe it was about the past. Maybe my sister was sending me a message, telling me that someday I would have a chance to do what I couldn't do for her, telling me to be ready. Iris didn't believe in dreams that predicted the future, but she'd stopped dismissing anything outright. The world was stranger and more mysterious than she'd ever imagined. What she did know was this: a woman had walked into a courtroom bruised and broken, and an Alpha King had watched her from the gallery, waiting for her to fall. And when she did, he'd caught her. Not because of destiny, not because of dreams, but because they'd both been brave enough to demand justice, even when the cost was everything. And that, in the end, was the only kind of magic that mattered. As they walked through the park, as Aiden told her about another case they'd just taken on, as Iris squeezed his hand and felt the warmth of his presence beside her, she thought about the girl she'd been in that courtroom. That girl had been terrified. That girl had believed she would lose. That girl had believed that the world was rigged against people like her. And she had been right. The world was rigged. The system was corrupt. Justice wasn't guaranteed. But she'd also learned something else. Sometimes, when you tell the truth, even when it costs you everything, there are people willing to stand beside you. There are people willing to burn their kingdoms down rather than let you stand alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to change the world. Like and subscribe.